give that assurance in the face of what we are seeing in our skies. For 2 weeks plus now, I think it's up to 16, 17 days, there have been sightings of craft of some kind. Some of them apparently do have an audio signature that is consistent with some kind of propeller or helicopter blade. They're not jet turbine, but they are hovering in some cases for many, many hours at an end, basically continuing to hover over very sensitive military facilities with apparent impunity. Now, whatever you say about whether these are UAPs or drones, that's an issue. That's a national security concern. And some of the people in the national security complex would basically say that's a threat, because until we know what they are, they are, by definition, a threat. And so, whilst people often get accused of pushing a threat narrative about unidentified objects, that's what they're talking about here. And I think that's the big issue here that a lot of people, including most of the mainstream media, are missing. Let's compare what happened in February last year, in 2023. One Chinese spy balloon set this to be an F-16 fighter approaching one of these luminous orbs at high altitude, and you see the orb zoom off in the face of the advancing F-16 jet. So are these drones, if they are drones, really faster than F-16 jets? Because if that's the case, it means there's a genuine issue of national security concern here, because these objects don't appear to have the kind of propulsion systems we're used to for drones, and they seem to be displaying full lights. They're showing, in many cases, what some people describe as navigation lights, but which one source of mine is suggesting might in fact be ISR sensors, perhaps some kind of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance sensor that's being used over these sensitive bases. Is it a coincidence that just a few months ago we were told that the United States would be forward deploying nuclear weapons because of the heightening tensions with Russia into some of these UK bases? Is that why a potential foreign adversary, or maybe something stranger, something more anomalous, is now taking it? Where it is that's operating these craft, these objects, over very sensitive military facilities, not just in the UK, but also clearly in Europe, Germany, and in multiple other countries around the world, including continuing reports in the continental USA. The people that are doing this are not being caught. They're operating with obvious impunity. And moreover, the technology that they are using is not susceptible to the known drone interdiction technology, which normally involves firing a signal at the craft and intercepting the signal that disrupts the operator's control of that drone. One thing that I am told is that we cannot use broad spectrum high pulse microwave weapons on these objects over sensitive military airspace. And that's because obviously there are fighter aircraft and other aircraft operating in the vicinity. One thing I know, and interestingly enough, I know this from people who tell me that HPMs, these high pulse microwaves, have been. Could it be perhaps that China has developed technologies that are far in advance of what the Russians have, and that what they are trying to do is provoke a conflict between the Russians and the Western world? Is that possible? Would they do such a dastardly thing? Certainly it's being suggested to me that these drones, if that's what they are more likely Chinese than Russian. And apparently we know this because of the very distinct audio signatures on these purported craft. Add to that the fact that, don't forget, just a few weeks ago, there was a very extraordinary incident where a Chinese vessel, which is almost certainly linked to the PLA, the Chinese army, was involved in dropping its anchor and dragging its anchor and snagging and severing very important internet cables in and around Scandinavia. Now, that incident still is largely unreported. It's an effective act of war by what we suspect sending a message. We simply don't know because our governments aren't telling us, and more importantly, our media is not curious enough to continue asking the question. And that's the issue. The issue, yet again, is the failure of much of the mainstream media to question the drone assertion. If the Pentagon spokesperson gets up and says that these are drones being seen over US and UK and other countries' very sensitive military facilities, over the Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier in a dock in Hamburg in Germany, that's a national security threat. That's a bigger threat than any kind of balloon being seen over the continental USA in February 2023, as we know. So why isn't it being aggressively reported and investigated by the media? Well, because much of the media allows itself to be tamely led by the nose by their intelligence sources. They don't want to burn their sources who are giving them cozy little stories about Ukraine, about Russia, and they're allowing themselves actively to be near Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State in May 2023, a silver grey sphere flying at low altitude. July 2024, a 3-foot-high shiny oval. January 2024, a silver ball following a plane. Several sightings also near Eglin Air Force Base, which we've reported on, in Florida, June the 4th, 2024. Silent silver orbs in formation. And again, June 12th, silent silver craft appears after a flash. Now, John and Jerry Tedesco, who we reported on from Long Island, they got an intriguing image of what looks like an orb literally tailing a commercial aircraft as it either exited or entered JFK Airport on the approaches to New York. This is a concern. These are objects operating inside highly sensitive airspace. God help us if there's a collision involving one of these objects and a commercial or military aircraft. That's what, because if it was aliens, and if they were malevolent or ill-disposed, I'm pretty sure they could have wiped us out a while back. So what else are we talking about on Reality Check this week? Well, as you know, I've been in Egypt for the last few weeks. It's been a fascinating journey, and I've got a lot to report. And we're preparing a couple of shows which will be going to air in the next few weeks. But in the interim, I thought it was time, because of the mounting number of questions I'm getting on my website and on my YouTube channel, I thought it was time I started addressing some of the questions that people have long been asking. So let's deal with some of those, the Q&As from our audience. The first one is from @ZSKI1. Do we know if these are high-tech military drones and UAPs have flashing lights and no one is questioning that? He makes the point. Absolutely right. Look, we've kind of addressed that already. We don't know if these are high-tech military drones. My sources are telling me they are. I don't necessarily believe them, and I gave evidence under oath to the Congress in November. He referred to a program known as Immaculate Constellation, which, it is my understanding, is a very small part of a whole series of secret codename programs that constitute what we would call the legacy UAP program. But nonetheless, it's a very significant one. And I am now aware of who Mr. Schellenberger's source is. I realise now I was speaking to that source many, many months ago. I wish them the best. I will be protecting their confidentiality. But I can tell you, I can vouch for who they are. And I think the fact that they have come forward is extraordinarily significant. But anyway, just to make the point, when Schellenberger made the statements under oath to Congress that he believed that this Immaculate Constellation was a program that was protected by secrecy by the Defense Department, it was formally denied by the Pentagon that Immaculate Constellation is a special access program controlled by the Department of Defense. And you know what? The Pentagon's spokeswoman was telling the truth. And I suspect she knows full well what